Good morning. I'm Andrew White. I direct the Center for New York City Affairs. Welcome to the new school. It's a good crowd for early in the morning. The Center is an applied policy institute that works on advancing innovation and excellence in government policies and programs affecting children and families and neighborhoods. And we do a lot of work on public education, as you know, which is what this event is all about. We're also home to a great website called InsideSchools.org, if I may say so myself, which helps parents and teens figure out the best schools for themselves and their children, and also helps people maneuver the city schools. We're all based at the Milano Graduate School of International Affairs, Management, and Urban Policy. And I don't want to take up a lot of time this morning because we have a long agenda, well, not a long agenda, but we have a lot to do, and we're going to finish right at 10 o'clock. So first, I want to thank a few people. I want to thank some of our trustees and advisors from the university, which is Julian Studley, who couldn't be here this morning, but Susan Halpern and Tony Manarino. I also want to thank the Milano Foundation that makes these events possible. And I want to thank Councilman Robert Jackson for attending. So the way this will work this morning, it's very straightforward. Council Speaker Quinn will give us talk about her vision of public education and the future of public education in New York City. And then she and Clara Hemphill will come over here and do a conversation for a little while, and then we'll take questions. And the questions are going to be on your postcards. That if you don't have a card, then you can use a piece of paper. But when you have a question in the latter part of the session, please just put your hand up and one of our crew will come around and get it from you and pass it up to the front. Let's see. I guess the one thing I do want to say is I want to point out how remarkable it is that public education is now such a formidable part of the political agenda in New York City. The fact that public education is drawing a crowd like this to a discussion that is seen by many people as an early stage in a campaign for mayor is kind of a remarkable thing. If I look back to the 1990s, this did not happen. And I think to some degree that's to our current mayor's credit, the fact that education has actually become a major priority and is now perhaps the top item on many of our agendas when it comes to looking for a new mayor. So on that note, I'm very pleased to say that we have a distinguished guest here. I first met Chris Quinn when she was a housing activist back more than 20 years ago. She's represented this district in the City Council since 1999, and she was elected by her colleagues as Speaker in 2006. And as you all know, she's now widely considered a leading candidate for the Democratic nomination in the 2013 race for mayor. So I guess that whole thing is still unfolding. Speaker Quinn.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Mr. Quinn, it's nice to see you made it here on time. He is actually wearing the tie I gave him for Christmas. If you'd like to discuss it with him, it has a golf theme on it. He fancies himself a very bad golfer, but thank you for joining us. I want to recognize my colleague, Education Chair Robert Jackson, who's with us today, and thank him for being here. I want to thank Andrew White and everybody at the new school so much. This is the second big address we've given in this room. We gave our first Food Works speech in this room, so you guys have been enormously helpful to us on so many different things, so thank you. I also want to thank and recognize Clara Hemphill, who's here, Kim Nayer, Dean David Scobie, and also a representative from Council Member Gail Brewer's office. So let's give them all a big round of applause. In 1913, my grandfather, John Callahan, left Ireland on a ship headed for America. He had a third-grade education and just a few dollars in his pocket. He moved to a boarding house in the East 40s and got a job as a milkman. He moved on to become a firefighter in the great FDNY and eventually rose to the very high rank of battalion chief. He got married, saved up enough money to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Inwood and rent a bungalow in Rockaways during the summer. He sent my late mother and my late aunt to Mount St. Vincent College so they would have even bigger opportunities than he and my grandmother did. For my grandparents, the path out of poverty required hard work, 24/7 work. But for my parents' generation, it took more than just hard work. It took an education. And that's what my mother, a social worker, my father, a union electrical worker, that's what they taught me and my sister. They told us over and over that we could be anything we wanted to be, just as long as we did well in school. And that's even more true for children today. Middle-class jobs that pay a middle-class salary demand high school or really college-level skills. Trade industry jobs like welding, they require geometry and a basic engineering. Employees at manufacturing firms, they need to operate computers to run assembly lines. If we want to keep New York City a place of opportunity for middle-class families, if we want to make it a place where people can really realize the American dream, moving their families into the middle class, like my grandparents did, we need a public education system that prepares every student for the jobs of the 21st century. Mayoral control has given us an unprecedented potential to build that education system. And Mayor Bloomberg and the DOE have taken key steps in the right direction. But I don't think anyone in this room or anywhere in the 5 boroughs would argue that our schools are where they need to be or where they should be. Graduation rates have risen across the city by almost 15%, but they're still nowhere near high enough. And only 1 in 4 students graduates college ready. For Black and Latino students, that rate drops to a pitiful 13%. So today, I'm going to outline a 4-point strategy that will pave the way for a new century of opportunity. Number 1, best practices, better schools. We identify the best parts of our system, the schools and the teachers and the principals that are making the biggest difference for our children. And we use their best practices to lift everybody up and make the whole system stronger. 2, learning 24/7. We make learning something that happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That means empowering parents to continue teaching at home and better engaging families in all parts of our system. And it means extending learning time for our highest needs students and using creative scheduling to make the best use out of every hour in our school day. Number 3, community schools. We make everything children need available through one strategic, coordinated effort, from after-school programs to healthcare to nutritious meals. Number 4, innovate to educate. We adopt a 21st century curriculum that focuses on the whole child and recognizes that individual students have individual needs and individual talents. That means creating the most intensive literacy support program in the country. It also means reducing the amount of time we spend on test prep so we can focus on the skills that prepare students for the 21st century. You hate that idea, right? I could feel it. This 4-point strategy will incorporate and build on education initiatives I've made a top priority for my 7 years as Speaker, and I couldn't have had a better partner than Robert Jackson in that effort. He does deserve a round of applause. It'll build on things like our focus on early childhood education, partnering with the DOE to create 4,000 additional full-day pre-kindergarten seats, and finally, making kindergarten mandatory in the 5 boroughs. Working with Education Committee Chair Robert Jackson and Finance Chair Dominic M. Recchia Jr., we secured $25 million to put proven reforms into action in our lowest performing middle schools. And we launched a first-of-its-kind training partnership with CUNY and local tech startups, where students gain the real-world skills they need to get good-paying tech jobs right out of college. We'll bring all this work and more into a comprehensive approach that improves performance at all our schools and gives every child the opportunity to excel. Now let's start with our first idea: best practices, better schools. In the last 10 years, we've collected tons of data on our students. We've used it to make the system more accountable, to let parents know how a school is performing. What we haven't done as well is look closely at our best schools, our best principals, our best teachers, and figure out what they're doing right so we can put those same techniques into place in other schools. A 2008 study of the DOE by the Parthenon Group found that high school graduation rates can be pretty accurately predicted by looking at a school size and its concentration of high-need, overage students. The bigger the school, the more high-needs children in that school, the lower the graduation rate. But there was one large school, just one in the whole study, that beat the odds: Harry Truman High School in the Bronx. Now, the DOE looked at the Parthenon study and said, we need to close big schools and open small ones. Now, look, I support small schools. I went to a small high school, and I know firsthand that they work for a lot of students. But while we're opening new small schools, why aren't we at the same time looking at what's worked so well at Truman and applying Truman's techniques to other big schools before we decide to close them? Truman is doing lots of great things, too many that we can list in one speech, but they all are worth replicating. Ninth graders who are behind in math and writing, they get enrolled in study skills boot camp. That's on top of their regular classes. Students are divided into different academies that focus instruction on several different career tracks. And none of these programs cost taxpayers any extra money. But they did take years of hard work, careful planning, and thoughtful use of private donations. This effort has been led by an outstanding principal, Sana Nasser, and a fantastic team of educators, administrators, and family. And I want to thank Sana, who is here with us today, ask her to stand up for all of her great work on behalf of Truman and its students. So thank you very, very much. Truman is far from the only school that's made great gains against great odds. There are lessons we can learn from schools of every shape and every size all over the city. So we're currently in discussions with several prominent research institutions, including Columbia Teachers College, to take the lead on an initiative we're calling the System-Wide Success Study. This will be an in-depth analysis of what techniques from our best performing schools of all types have proven most successful with different types of students. We'll clearly identify best practices and apply them to schools with similar populations or similar challenges, so every school can reach its maximum potential. By the way, this is how we can finally make good on the promise of charter schools. I support charter schools. They're part of our system. And I believe we waste far too much time and energy in this system debating something that has already been decided. But when we first opened the doors to charters, we promised there'd be laboratories for innovation, and we'd take their most successful strategies citywide. Well, it's been 10 years. And unless your child goes to a charter school, you probably haven't seen any benefit at all. With our system-wide success study, we can finally use charters in the way they were intended, figure out what the best ones are doing right, and use that knowledge to help every school improve. Now, we don't just hand out a list of good ideas and leave schools to do the rest. What we'd do would be work with school leaders to develop a strategy of implementation, help them leverage outside resources, and draw in community partners to make new programs really effective. And we don't have to wait for a school to get bad grades on its report card before we provide them with extra support. We'll create a red alert system for struggling schools, looking at early indicators like absentee rates and graduation rates, and identify them well before they're slated to close. We'll provide them the support they need. We'll provide them the support they need to put the ideas from the system-wide success study into action. And most importantly, we'll give them the time to turn things around, not just wait a year and pull the plug. Now, there might be some schools that we aren't able to save, and we can't continue to send children to schools that can't provide a quality education. But instead of treating school closing like a goal in and of itself, we should see it as an ultimate last resort when all else has failed. And we should make fixing schools not just the responsibility of the principal and the teacher, but of all of city government and the entire community. You know, Bill Clinton said, "There's nothing wrong in America that can't be fixed by what's right in America." Well, that's true here too. There's nothing wrong with New York City schools that can't be fixed by what's right with New York schools. And guided by that same principle, we're going to identify our best teachers and tap them to work with their colleagues to help everyone excel. Studies show that of all the factors that affect student achievement, the most important is having a good teacher. And the great news is, we don't have to hire consultants to come in from outside and tell our teachers how to teach. We have experts of our own. The thousands of experienced, top-performing teachers spread throughout our 1,700 schools. I'm proposing a mentor teaching program where every new teacher in our public school system receives a year of intensive hands-on support from one of our city's best teachers. Right now, professional development, it's wildly inconsistent across our system. So I propose that we take some of the $450 million we spend every year on professional development and use it to create a core of mentor teachers who will help develop and support our newest educators. So even if your child has a first-year teacher, they'll benefit from the experience of our city's best. They'll help new teachers develop effective strategies for supporting all students, including English language learners and children with special needs. We'll base our program on a model that's been tremendously successful in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's been part of a comprehensive strategy that's given the highest graduation rates of any large school district in the country. We'll identify our top teachers and offer them the opportunity to leave the classroom temporarily and take on the challenge and responsibility of mentoring our novice teachers. We'll enroll them in an elite master class run by our great CUNY, where they'll share best practices and learn techniques for working with colleagues. After 2 years of service as a mentor teacher, they'll return to the classroom, ensuring that we aren't taking our best educators out of the classroom on a permanent basis. And over time, we'll build up a reserve of expert teachers at schools all over the city who can work with colleagues in both formal and informal ways. One final point on this subject. Thursday is the deadline for the city to reach a teacher evaluation deal or else forfeit millions of dollars from the state. Contract agreements in both Newark and New Haven have proven you can have an evaluation system that works and is fair for everyone. A system that doesn't punish hardworking teachers, but instead helps them to improve. So to both sides, I say, lower the temperature of this debate. Stop the name-calling, stop the finger-pointing, and remember the fact we all share the same goal of helping children, providing the best resources for our kids, and preparing them for college and careers. So let's all come together and let's get a deal. This is simply too important for our children and our city. Thank you, RJ. It's good to bring RJ to anywhere you're going because he brings you a really strong amen chorus all the time, and I appreciate that. This brings me to my second strategy, learning 24/7. If you want to prepare students for college and for middle-class jobs of today, we need to recognize that schools can't do it alone. Parents are the single most important factor in a child's development. Don't tell my father. Yet too often we treat them as an afterthought. Did you remember to put your hearing aids in? Oh, there we go. He last stayed in the city. I said, what'd you think? He said, I forgot to put my hearing aids in. I'm just saying. Parent involvement and their ability to hear you isn't just some abstract kumbaya idea that makes people feel good. 3 decades of research has shown us clearly that engaging families leads to better attendance, higher grades and higher test scores, and improved behavior. Parent engagement has 3 distinct components: giving parents the tools they need to help their children succeed, being responsive to parents looking for assistance, and including parents in the decision about their child's education. Today, I'm proposing a package of reforms called Parents Matter. It'll focus on 3 pieces. Every parent has questions like, is my child on track to succeed in college? How do I know which books are right for his reading level? Where's the line between helping her with her homework and actually just doing it for her? To answer these questions and many others, we'll create an online parent university where families can go to learn about everything from nutrition to study skills and brush up on different class subjects. We'll make these resources available in multiple languages to support all those families who come to New York City from all over the world. And we'll expand on the College Readiness Initiative developed by New Visions for Public Schools. They teach parents of 9th graders what students need to prepare for college and careers, and share student data so they know whether their child is staying on track. And I'm proud to announce today that we're partnering with Inside Schools to launch an online tool to help simplify the complicated school choice system. You enter basic information about your child's academic history and what they're looking for in a school, and you get side-by-side comparison of different schools that might be a good fit. Now, not everything we're talking about here requires a new program. Sometimes it's just about recommitting to doing things better. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the online shoe company Zappos. Now, for those of you who know me, I know you're shocked. I figured out how to work shoes into the speech, but I will say 50% off online, and they're good, right? Okay, I just want to say a pop of color never hurt an education speech. But anyway, Zappos is widely recognized as a standout in customer service. They're known for being obsessive, and I think being obsessive about things like customer service is a good thing. Their operators are instructed to stay on the phone as long as it takes to get a customer what they need. The longest call has been logged in as 10.5 hours. That caller might have had other challenges, but neither here nor there, the operator stayed on the phone. If Zappos can bring that level of commitment and urgency when they're dealing with shoes, the greatest city in the world should be able to do the same thing for our parents and children. We already have the infrastructure in place, parent coordinators and district family advocates. And some schools are actually doing this really well. But we still have a long way to go before every family feels like their concerns are being heard and their problems are being solved. So the second part of Parents Matter will be a commitment to providing the best customer service we possibly can to every family. We'll make sure every parent coordinator and every family advocate is fully trained, supported, and resourced. And most importantly, we'll introduce a ComStat for Parent 311 hotline. We'll track the amount of time it takes for a family's issues to get resolved, And we'll make that information public so you can hold us accountable. Through Parents Matter, we'll also engage parents in relevant decisions and keep them in the loop about changes that affect their child's schools. This is another area where we already have the infrastructure in place. We just need to commit to listen to parents and to take their perspective seriously. And anytime the DOE rolls out a new policy or program, we need to think about how that might impact parents and families. That's why we actually have community education councils. That's why we have the Chancellor's Parent Advisory Committee. They exist to help us strategize and minimize potential problems. We need to engage them earlier and in more thoughtful ways. With Parents Matter, we'll make parents real partners in our education system, and we'll make sure learning continues at home. But the fact remains, students in New York City still aren't spending enough hours in structured learning environments if we really want them to be able to compete in a 21st century economy. Dozens of studies over the last decade show the same results, particularly amongst lower performing students. More learning time leads to greater academic achievement, better attendance, and more enthusiastic learners. There are a number of ways that different schools and districts have found to extend learning time. The most comprehensive involves actually increasing the number of hours both the student and teachers are in school. This has been done in charter schools like KIPP, and it's a key part of the Massachusetts 2020 education plan, which has become a true national model. Now, as you might imagine, extending teacher hours makes this a particularly expensive approach. So some schools and districts have found more affordable ways to expand learning time. For example, Brooklyn Generation School staggers teacher schedules to give students 20 extra days of instruction each year without any additional staff costs. Then there's the 49 schools in the Council's Middle School Quality Initiative, a collaboration between the DOE and the Council, but I said the Council twice because we thought of it. All right, that didn't go over that funny. A lot of DOE people here, I guess. These 49 schools, the councils identified, they've rescheduled their school day to make more time for small group literacy instruction. They found that was their biggest challenge. And it's already showing promising results with both low and high-performing children. Today, I'm proposing that we keep more of our children in a structured education program until 6 p.m., 5 days a week, using a combination of all of these different models. We'll start by targeting the schools that face the biggest challenges, the 100 schools with the highest percentage of students who qualify for free or reduced price lunch. And we know that adding extra hours doesn't produce better results unless schools are prepared to use that time well. So once again, we'll use the results of our system-wide success study, and we'll work with teachers, parents, and students and community groups to determine the best approach for each individual school. Last week, Governor Cuomo announced a competitive grant program to help bring extended learning time to school districts around New York State. And we're grateful to the governor for this exciting news. Well, I'm making this commitment today, and I know I speak for RJ as well. We'll spend the year we have left in the council using every resource at the council's disposal to make sure that New York City gets a major share of those funds from the governor. This takes us to our third strategy. If we want to give New Yorkers a pathway to the middle class, we have to think about our schools in a more comprehensive way. This means expanding on a proposal that I first outlined in my State of the City speech last year, bringing a more comprehensive community schools approach to the 5 boroughs. The community school model, it focuses on the question every one of us should be asking every single day. What do our children need? Yes, they need great teachers and great principals and great parents. But that's not all they need to be successful. Just because you have a great teacher, That doesn't mean we've removed all the other barriers that can make it hard to learn. You need to be able to see a doctor when you're sick. You need physical activity. You need healthy meals. You might need tutoring or after-schools programs, internships, summer jobs. Right now, there are people across the city providing these kinds of services and more, but we're not all working together. Community schools recognize that we can only achieve great results if everyone works strategically towards the same specific goal. This also means that educators need to coordinate at every level, even if they aren't at the same school. It means that the preschool needs to be teaching the right vocabulary so that when children get into grade school, they're ready to read at the elementary school level. And high school students are learning study skills so they can manage their time well in college. This model has produced remarkable results in places like Houston and Oakland and Cincinnati. I recently visited a school in Cincinnati that's part of the community schools effort. They have a medical clinic, a beautiful clinic in their building where students and their family can get primary care through Medicaid and insurance, and it doesn't cost their school or their Department of Education a dime. This means that kids aren't missing days of school going to the emergency room after an asthma attack. They're just going downstairs and getting a new prescription for their inhaler. It's been so successful that the day I was at this school, they were opening an eye clinic. A private entity was opening an eye clinic because they knew of the insurance and the Medicaid. This meant children who needed glasses were going to get them so they could see the blackboard and read their books. And on Friday afternoons at this school, a local food bank sets up in the cafeteria and gives children whose families are on food stamps extra food for the weekend. Because remember, they won't be getting their breakfast or lunch during the weekend because they're not at school. All these individual pieces come together to make a huge difference in student performance. High school graduation rates in Cleveland have climbed from 51% to 83% because of community school initiatives. We've started rolling them out in targeted neighborhoods in New York City. The council recently launched a partnership with the DOE and a group called Zone 126 to bring community schools to Western Queens. There's great work being done by our neighbors and partners at the UFT, the Children's Aid Society, and Chancellor Walcott and others. But if we want to take community schools to the next level, we can't just have a piecemeal approach. We need a coordinated citywide effort. In Cincinnati, they pulled all stakeholders together into a single citywide partnership with a single set of goals. Compare that to New York City. Over the course of a single day, a child might interact with agencies run by half a dozen different city agencies. High schools, the school is operated by the DOE, but his after-school program is run by the Department of Youth and Community Development. He gets food stamps through the Human Resources Administration and attends a clinic run by the Department of Health or the Health and Hospitals Corporation. And you think all these agencies are talking to each other every day about that child, coordinating their strategies and techniques? Think again. We found this out the hard way when I first started working to expand access to pre-kindergarten back in 2006. We wanted to know how many full-day pre-kindergarten seats there were in 2006 in different neighborhoods. Well, we discovered that the DOE didn't have a list of what classes were being funded by the Administration for Children's Services. And ACS didn't know what full-day classes were being run by the Department of Education. If we can't even coordinate programs across city agencies, how are we going to manage a real community school effort that brings hundreds of community groups, business leaders, service providers, families, and schools in dozens of diverse neighborhoods together? We can do better. That's why I propose that we create a new office of the Deputy Mayor for Education and Children. That Deputy Mayor would oversee all agencies that work directly with children and better coordinate the many services available to children and their families. Not only will this help provide better oversight and eliminate redundancy, it'll send a powerful message that New York City is focused on the whole child and dedicated to addressing all of a student's needs. Now, we've reached the fourth and final strategy. To prepare a child for college and careers, we need an innovative curriculum that focuses on the needs of individual students. We need to start with the fundamentals, but we also need to recognize that the middle-class jobs of the 21st century require more than just math and English language proficiency. New York City is a place that understands the value of art and culture and of thinking in new and creative ways. We need a school system that makes time for science and technology, art and music, physical education and creative thinking. And that's simply not possible in a system where everything builds towards a series of standardized tests. I recently spoke with a mother of 2 girls in Brooklyn Public Schools. She told me that her 3rd graders spent nearly a month of class time on test prep, 6 days taking the test, and 3 more days doing busy work while her teacher was off-site grading the test. Then, on top of all of the other tests that students currently take, they also participate in field testing. As much as 30% of all the questions on state exams don't even count toward a student's score. They exist solely to help testing companies try out new test questions. Here we are, trying to give children more constructive learning time. And these pointless questions, when you total it up, they're adding nearly 2 extra days of test taking. Meanwhile, on top of that, students in 47 schools take an additional field test made up of nothing but trial questions. We pay companies like Pearson millions of dollars to administer the standardized test. I think they can afford to test new questions without dumping the burden on our children and on our teachers. These field tests are nothing more, Mr. Quinn, you're talking and I'm giving a speech. Thank you very much. There'll be a demerit on your record later. See the nun on the way out. Let me go back to field testing. These field tests, which he may or may not agree with, but the press will not speak to him. These field tests are a waste of time, plain and simple. And I propose that we do away with them immediately. Now, the problem isn't just the amount of time children spend taking the test. It's also the amount of time they spend preparing for the test in a way that's often disconnected from the skills they need for college and beyond. Testing, it's part of how we measure student achievement, but it shouldn't be the only way we measure student achievement. Some schools use alternative assessments that are even more effective at measuring students' performance and holding everyone accountable. Portfolio assessments, where teachers evaluate a collection of student work that showcases the information they've learned and progress they've made throughout the year. Portfolios are already being used at several of our city's top-performing schools. And I propose we continue to expand portfolio assessment and other alternative assessments. Eliminating field testing and looking at different ways of assessing student performance, this will free up time to focus on the skills our students need to stay competitive in a global economy, skills like computer programming and web design. Between 2005 and 2010, jobs in New York City's tech sector grew by 30%. And computer skills are now key components of jobs in dozens of other industries, from advertising to manufacturing. Schools like P-Tech in Crown Heights are leading the way in preparing students for a job in the technology industry. They've partnered with IBM to create a 6-year program that provides students with both a Regents diploma and an associate's degree in applied sciences. Students there attend school from 8:30 to 4 in 10-period days that intersperse traditional classes like math and English with technology and business-centric courses. We need to bring early college high schools to even more neighborhoods. And I'll be working with Mayor Bloomberg and CUNY to open 3 more of these programs over the next year. But even if you don't go to an early college high school, you should still have the opportunity to learn tech skills that can prepare you for 21st century jobs. So I'm also proposing that we make computer science classes available to students at every high school in New York City. And I'm proud to join with Google and a whole coalition of advocates and business leaders who are pushing to include computer science in the new Common Core standards. Technology has changed what we need to teach, and it's also changed how we need to teach. Thanks to the internet, teachers in any given subject can share lessons and materials with colleagues around the world. They can organize those lessons into open source online textbooks, which their students can read on tablets in school or at home. So I'm proposing that we move all of our 1,700 schools from a system of textbooks to a system of tablets. Thank you very much, lady in the third row. All right, there we go. And if you think that sounds like it costs a lot of money, listen to this. We currently spend more than $100 million a year on textbooks. That's enough money to buy tablets for every student in New York City's public schools and cover costs to make sure these online texts are meeting rigorous standards. So a teacher in the Bronx can pull together the most relevant information for his class and update it throughout the year to stay current. He can incorporate videos and interactive multimedia assignments that better engage children who are now living in the digital world. By using tablets instead of textbooks, the possibilities really are limitless. Focusing on technology and 21st century job skills is critical. But we can't expect children to learn about web programming if they aren't already firm in the fundamentals. We talk a lot these days about preparing children for college, and we should. But let's face it, we're not doing enough to prepare children for the 4th grade. Less than 50% of our 3rd graders are reading on grade level. And right now, we're not doing nearly enough to help these children catch up. Students who read below grade level in 3rd grade are 4 times less likely to get a high school diploma. If we can't solve this problem, almost nothing else we do will really have an impact. Reading and writing are the foundation of every aspect of learning. If you can't read or write, you're going to have trouble getting a driver's license, let alone a middle-class job. I want New York City to become synonymous with a laser-like focus on reading and writing. So today, I propose we create the most intensive literacy support program in the country, and it should be centered on 3 principles: a strong start, literacy in every class, and making sure no child falls through the cracks. 1, we build a strong foundation through an integrated pre-K to 3rd grade approach. We align standards, strategies, and curricula, and teachers in every grade engage in joint planning and shared professional development. 2, we provide training for all teachers at every grade level, no matter what subject they teach, on how to work literacy into their classroom experience. We're seeing this done well at schools across the city, like the great New Dorp High School on Staten Island, where graduation rates soared after they incorporated writing into all of their lessons. I want to recognize a New Dorp's principal, Deirdre DeAngelis, who's here with us today. Where's Deirdre? Yay! And I just want to give a second shout out to Deirdre, who is one of the unsung heroes of the Sandy hurricane. Deirdre had a lot of damage on her home. That didn't distract her from her school, which is obviously on Staten Island, where her students and their families had tons of damage. She was in that school literally like the day after the storm. There 24 hours. I saw her around the clock, has organized Thanksgiving meals, toy drives, and asked to take in another middle school on Staten Island that lost its school in the storm. So if we could just give Deirdre another round of applause. So thank you. And she's figured out a way where you incorporate literacy into chemistry. I had it in the speech, but I couldn't explain it, so see Deirdre if you wanted to know how to do that. She does it very well. I would not be able to. Finally, number 3, we provide high-quality interventions and remedial instruction for students who are falling behind. Because even if we take a proactive approach, there will always be students who need some extra support to excel to their full potential. And all of the proposals I've discussed today could cost as much as $300 million. But as I've mentioned, we can cover most of these costs by making better use or redirecting existing funds, like the money we spend on textbooks instead being spent on tablets, like the $450 million we're spending on professional development, using it better for the mentor-teacher program. And I also believe we can find additional savings within the DOE's budget, like the $1.2 billion DOE spends each year on contracts and consultants. We can effect real change and implement real reform by being smarter and more coordinated with the dollars we now have. We can't afford to do anything less, not when it comes to something as important as preparing a student for the jobs of the future, or giving a child the gift of reading. I can remember the critical role reading played in my life growing up. The hours I spent at my school library, poring over a rack of dog-eared paperback books. They were biographies of great women and political leaders. These books taught me the power that individual people can have to change the world, and these books are what made me know I wanted to work in politics and government. We all have stories like that. Every one of us sitting in this room, we're here today because of some miraculous moment like that. Whether it was a miraculous moment with another student or an educator or an advocate, every one of us has had a teacher that's opened our eyes to a new possibility, a class that turned us on to a lifelong passion, or a parent that pushed us and believed in us and supported us every step of the way. We can't let a single one of New York City's children grow up without that same support and that same potential. You know, my grandfather came here just a teenager when he got on a boat and left Ireland, not knowing if he would ever see his family or get to go home again. He came to New York City with no idea how he would make a living or afford to live here, but he was remarkably not afraid because he had heard that New York City was a place where anything was possible, a place where hard work and a little luck would be your ticket to a better life. I believe New York City is still that place. And when our children step into our public schools, I want them to believe that and feel that too. I want them to feel that same sense of possibility, that same fearlessness, that same optimism for the future that Pa, as we called him, felt when he stepped on that boat and left the only life he knew, an ocean, behind him. People from all over the world still get on those boats and ships. They come to New York City by the tens of thousands. They come here, specifically here, because we're known for having the best jobs, the best university, the best culture, because we're New York City. We want middle-class families to get up and come here because they know we have the best public schools in the nation. But that can only happen if we find ways to work harder together, if we bring all stakeholders to the table and recognize that everyone has something to contribute. That's what I've tried to do since the moment I became Speaker. It's the guiding principle behind all we've been able to accomplish. It's why we brought together a team of experts with wildly different opinions to produce the definitive strategy for middle school reform in our city. It's how we coordinated multiple agencies and service providers to create better opportunities for early childhood education. If we can continue that commitment to collaboration, then we can fully tap into the potential of our best schools, our best teachers, and our best principals. We can make learning something that happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We can make the entire city part of our education process, and we can introduce a 21st century curriculum that focuses on the whole child. Working together, we'll build an education system where having choice doesn't mean competing for scarce resources. Where having autonomy doesn't mean we've left you out there on your own. A system where our leaders have the authority to make bold decisions and families have a voice in their own child's education. Where we collect the data we need to hold everyone accountable, but don't allow testing to become more important than teaching. When we look ahead at the next 10 years, we have great cause for optimism. The foundation is here. We just need the conviction and the vision to build on it. Now, it won't be easy. Nothing important ever is. And it won't happen overnight. But I believe working together, we will get there. And we will keep New York City a place of opportunity for middle-class families, for today, for tomorrow, and for generations to come. Thank you all. We're going to sit down? All right.
Have a seat. All right, great speech. So I want to introduce Clara Hemphill, who is the founder of Inside Schools and senior editor at the Center for New York City Affairs. She's going to ask a few questions, and we're also going to take questions from you all. If you have a question, please put your hand up with the card, and one of our crew will come around and pick them up. Clara.
Thank you. I'm going to talk very fast because we're going to be out of here by 10, which is 25 minutes. So I thought your speech was really interesting.
Thank you. Thank God. That would stay.
I'm a little bit concerned because so much of the way the current system is organized goes counter to what you're proposing. For example, the current system of principal autonomy and competition, where the principals compete with each other to be the best school, really discourages shared practices. And the test prep is not just so that the kids do well on the test, but that's the way that the teachers and the principals are judged. So how do you need to reorganize the way, the current administration really dismantled the districts and gave each principal the notion that he should run his school the way he thinks best. Are you going to change that notion?
Well, look, I think the idea of the principal as the head or chief of a school makes a lot of sense. And we have a lot of great principals out there. So I don't want to discourage principals from feeling like they have the authority and the ability to make the decisions that they know are right for the children in their school. But having principals near each other physically or in schools that have similar themes or, frameworks feel like they can't work together makes no sense, right? What's the thing about team? There's no I in team, people, right? And if we're all a big team working for New York City's children, we can't have a system that says coordination is bad and competition in an effort to beat each other for the sake of beating each other is good. So I want a principal to feel like it's his or her building and it's her responsibility to make sure she's leading well. but she's going to lead better when she's working collectively and with everybody. And the goal here is to help children do better, and you need to do whatever you have to do to get that done. And if there's a good idea a borough away, a block away, let's get it into your school.
The community schools is something that we've proposed at the new school. We're
big at taking other people's ideas and pretending they were ours. Just, it doesn't work in academia.
But it does cost money. I mean, coordination of services, you still have to pay somebody to coordinate them.
It doesn't. I mean, look at the school. Let me talk about the school I was at. Well, first of all, we have lots of people coordinating lots of different things. So, you know, it's not like we're short of people we could bring in to coordinate things. A. B, look at the school I was in Cincinnati. It's not so much that it was coordination as it was planning, right? So that school, when it was built, and we'll have real potential in this when we're building new schools. When they built that school, they specifically built it bigger than they needed it to be so that they would have potential of additional space. So when the not-for-profit in the neighborhood wanted to do a preschool, and even a preschool for, you know, a daycare for infants, there was space in that elementary school for that school to house them. Now, the school didn't have to charge them rent, but the school did work out a deal that if a student in their elementary school had a sibling who needed preschool or was an infant for the daycare, they could be part of that program, which makes it very comprehensive. The food bank I talked about is doing its work anyway. The difference is the parent doesn't have to find a time in between the 2 or 3 jobs they might be working to get to the food bank before it closes at 6 p.m. to pick up the weekend food. The child can just take it home with them. And the eyeglass clinic didn't cost the city anything, but the school, when it was built, made sure it had spaces that could be built out for something like that. We just need to plan differently in the beginning, and I think it will have insignificant amounts of additional costs.
Teachers and principals that I talk to feel really battered, demoralized. They feel battered by constant criticism, teacher bashing. How do you rebuild confidence?
You know, and I don't blame them. And I've said this before, we need to stop vilifying educators. Look, every profession has people who aren't great at it. There's outstanding elected officials. Thank you very much for the applause. And there's not so great elected officials. You know, every profession has people who you think, why did that person decide to do that? But we talk as if that's the majority of school teachers and principals, and it's simply not. So I think you change that by, I hope, in ways like what I think you heard in its speech today, a recognition that what we need to get teachers who might be struggling to their highest level exists right now amongst our core of teachers who are out there every day.
Would you push for a broad expansion of charter schools?
I mean, you know, one of the things that discourages me about the whole charter school debate is it becomes such a high-pitched, sucks all the oxygen out of the room debate. Charter schools exist. They're going to be part of our system. They are never going to serve the majority of New York City school children. It is simply not possible. I think the level we're at is a good level, and I think we need to stop fighting over them. And I think we just need to recognize that the real potential where they could help all other children in these laboratories of innovation has never been met.
I'd like the cards with the other questions, so. Yeah. Well, that's the question. Would you make them pay rent?
If you make charter schools pay rent, that's the end of charter schools. I don't agree. I don't think we want to make charter schools the definition of our system. I think we're at an appropriate level, but I don't think we should pull that option because for some parents it's an option that they've embraced. Now, is the co-location system working for charters or bringing public district schools in and out of district schools working for either situation? No. And you know co-location isn't working because both the proponents of charter schools say it's not working and the opponents of charter schools. But we have to find a way to continue to do co-locations for districts and district charters That's not going to stop, but we have to find a way to do it right, transparently, with real parental and community input. Look, in my district, it wasn't a charter issue. We had 2 schools that were together in a building, and they existed really well in that building for a long time. But nobody paid attention really at the DOE to how quickly each of those schools were growing. And it seemed like over a night, everybody was at each other's throats. And we ended up having to move one school out temporarily to rent a Catholic school. It's soon going to get a new space. That's another example of not doing co-locations well, because we created an enormous level of tension and stress between an elementary school and a middle school that we didn't need to if we had actually managed things in a transparent kind of a way.
What control, this is a question from the audience, what control do you plan to give to the CECs and to the PEP?
So the CECs, let's take a step back for a second. Let's talk for a second about community boards. Community boards are very similar in structure and mission to the CECs, right? They're entities of public citizens volunteering their time who are giving advice to the city government. Community boards have an enormous input in what happens on land use in city government. That doesn't mean every time a community board says something or asks something, they get what they want. But trust me, when we've negotiated enormous land use projects, like the Hudson Yards, acres and acres, the community board is in the room, or their resolution is on the table. A community board resolution guides the questioning at the land use committee. Why? Because we have respect for community boards. We take their input seriously. There is no reason why CEC's opinions, inputs, resolutions aren't treated the same way by the Department of Education as the community boards is by the City Council or by the Department of City Planning. The only reason is the DOE doesn't feel that way. And if the DOE is instructed to treat CECs and their opinion and their hard work the same way as the council does for community boards and city planning does for community boards, I think we'll see a revolutionary change. If we can give that much attention to public citizens when they're spending hours deciding on land use or even deciding on things like how many chairs a sidewalk cafe should have, we can give input to when parents and citizens are giving us input on important education issues.
So you... Thank you,
Thank you, RJ. I don't think it's a structural question. I think it's government's perspective and vision is the problem.
How can you, this is another question from the audience, how can you facilitate better cooperation between charter and district schools when co-location and community wishes are ignored, i.e. Eva Moskowitz and her ilk?
So yeah, you have to, look, whoever the mayor is, the buck stops with. And the mayor needs to say that the system, as it relates to coordination and input and discussion, has to change. And the system around how co-locations work has to be made transparent, has to be clear. And if there isn't that type of coordination or collaborative work, people need to, on all parts of the discussion, need to be held accountable. That happening is not complicated. It needs to be a directive from the mayor, and if people disregard it, they need to be held accountable. I mean, it's ironic we talk about holding people who do education jobs accountable for everything else except for working collaboratively in this type of regard. We clearly know how to hold people accountable.
In order for New York City's schools to thrive, we have an obligation to include a comprehensive birth to age 5 early childhood education agenda that must be integrated into the 4 strategies laid out this morning. What's the plan?
Well, and I think...
Was that by your staff?
I know, it sounds distinctively. Whoever on the staff wrote that, do a better job of hiding that you worked for the speaker when you write your question. Or if you're just a member of the public, thank you for the support. You know, one, again, and I don't mean to oversimplify, it means starting with the decision you're going to do it. Right? So even, this may seem silly, when I'm meeting with people from the Department of Education, all the time they say K through 8. I say, no, pre-K through 8. And they say, well, that's not what it is. I said, I know, but that's what it's going to be. And even if you start talking that way, it makes a difference, right? It makes a difference in how we think and how we plan. So one, we need to start as we're renting new spaces for schools, building new spaces for school, fundamentally building them in a way that they have the right amount of space to actually have a true early childhood education focus, a pre-K through 5 focus. I mean, we've had challenges in places where they say we just can't do a pre-K because we don't have the ability to have the, itty-bitty little bathrooms and whatnot that are needed. Let's not have to hear that anymore in new buildings and in new spaces that we are going to lease and rent and retrofit. 2, we need to do, as I've mentioned, a much better job of coordinating the different agencies that are providing early childhood education. It was just, quite frankly, unacceptable that the Department of Education in 2006 had no idea how many full-day pre-K slots ACS was providing. That's not the fault of the not-for-profits that were providing them. It's not the fault of the schools that were providing it. It was a fault of the agencies that were coordinating it. And let's back up for a second. We have a Department of Health. Everybody who's born gets a birth certificate, right? So the child who's born today, God willing, is going to be 4 years old 4 years from now. Now, is his or her family definitely going to stay in the neighborhood they're in? No, not. But I'm sure we have census-y type people out there who can give us some guiding statistics, right, of how many people stay, how many people leave. So why don't we start coordinating DOE and ACS and DOH, MH, how many kids were born this year? How many pre-K seats are we going to need? How many K seats are we going to need? I'm sure it's a little more complicated, but it's not rocket science. You know what I mean?
You mean if you give permission to build Trump Towers on the Upper West Side, they might have some children in those buildings and you might have to expand the schools?
And that's another thing, and we've actually been having a lot of discussion about that, and actually we're working on it actually for this speech, but we're still chewing on it, so if anybody has any other good ideas like Clara's that we could rip off, see me afterwards. But how do you link the real estate process more clearly to funds around building schools and that type of a thing?
2 elements of mayor control that have thwarted parent involvement: the system of networks and the panel for educational policy. Would you make any changes to either of those?
You know, I would love to talk to folks more about networks, because I have not fully made up my mind on the question of networks, but I have a lot of questions about networks. I mean, some people feel like networks have been a benefit and they've got to pick schools that are kind of like-minded to work with. Other folks feel like it really doesn't make sense, and that not being in kind of closer mesh with the schools that are nearby, where maybe a child's sibling is more likely to go, doesn't make any sense. So I have a lot of questions about the network system that I want to have more conversation with parents and educators about.
From the parents' perspective, if you can't resolve the question
that is,
at the school level, there's nobody to go to, and 311 refers you back to the school. So it's
that is part of the problem. I mean, in the kind of geographic structure, there was at least kind of a clear chain of command, if you will, for lack of a better description. And I think that really is a challenge, because then you can end up feeling like you're banging your head against the wall. And look, we'd like to get to a place where more of the answers to parents is yes, but even if the answer is no, you'd rather get to know and know that in a reasonable amount of time where you feel like you've fully run out all of your resources.
When an elementary school child is zoned for a failing school, what options do you believe they should be given to get a better education?
Well, look, as I said, I want to try to reduce the number of schools that we have that are failing. And I think there's the potential to do that. I think we end up far too late in the system looking at schools that aren't doing well. I mean, for God's sakes, we have all of this data. Why can't we intervene earlier so less parents are in that situation, and in the situation where, look, unfortunately, some things fail. In every sector of life, some things fail. Let's make the goal of reducing that number. And when they fail, putting systems in place where we're clearly coordinating with the parents in that school to figure out where to move their child to in the most seamless, easy way. And also, we need to be mindful of, which I don't think we do at all, sending the message to the children of those schools that they did not fail. Because the stigma just must be terrible for that child when they have to move on to another school.
You talked about teacher training and development. What about teacher support?
Well, I think part of what we want to do here through changes in teacher training and development is about teacher support, is about teachers helping teachers identify what is needed, and also clearly creating what I hope would be a vision for teachers of how important they are, tracks for other opportunities as mentor teachers, which may lead people to interest in administration and other things like that, that I hope will address challenges we face around retention.
You support the best practices model, but the best performing schools means schools that have the best performance on tests. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I hope that doesn't become our defining factor anymore. I mean, that's part of why I have fought to expand schools that are allowed to use portfolio assessments. And I think if you look at many of the schools that are using the portfolio assessment model, they are some of the best schools in the city. And that's a very different model, and that's really why we've been pushing so hard to get more schools to be allowed to use portfolio assessments, and I hope we can really take that number and other alternative assessments even higher.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap it up on that note.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you guys very much.